Hey, friends, we are here with two of my local friends today, which I'm very excited. That is always a treat. You are going to get to meet Emily Hall and Heather Sager. They're both based out of the Portland, Oregon area. And I actually met both of them online first before I met them in person. Heather was actually, I think, part of a program that I coached in, my friend Haley Burkhead's Recurring Profit. And then Emily, I believe I met at an event for Upper Left Ladies in person, right? And then she ended up becoming a member of our clubhouse, which is our women's co working space here in Oregon. So, anyways, Emily and Heather, I'm so thrilled to finally have you all on the show.
Yay, we're here. We're so excited. And it's so funny. We're local, but we are doing this over the internet.
Yes. So actually, it's funny when you guys asked on Voxer, like, hey, are we meeting in person? Because for some reason, my brain didn't even think, yeah, like we could totally meet in person. But I was telling them offline that my setup is not really well situated for a multi person live podcast recording because I think all of our sound signals would interfere with one another. So someday soon, I hope I will have a beautiful studio set up where you can actually come back and we can do the whole thing again in person. So, we're here today because we have a really interesting case study for you guys. Emily and Heather actually recently partnered. They merged their businesses together into the Speaker Co. And I think you two are actually the very first pair that we've had on the show that had separate businesses before that merged into one rather than founded a business together to begin with. So, usually I start out our interviews asking our guests, what is your cubicle to CEO story? But I feel like for the purpose of this interview, it'd be more interesting to hear what was your ideation or formation story, so to speak.
Well, that's good. It all started with mimosas, as any good story does. Well, what's funny is, okay, that event that you mentioned that you met Emily at, that was part of mine and Emily's courting experience. Emily and I became internet friends. Also, we live 10 minutes away from each other, but we met on the internet. And we started connecting over Instagram and then meeting for coffee in person and then shoulder tapping, say, hey, there's a local event you want to come. So we started talking. We both do really similar things. Emily had a presentation design studio. I'm a speaking coach. We serve similar audiences. So we started meeting up for regular coffee dates, which was, I mean, a rare thing. I'm an introvert. I don't do that very often. So Emily, I was like, all right, she's got to be good. But randomly this last spring, we met for brunch at one of our favorite Portland restaurants. And we're sitting there drinking mimosas, talking about what's going on in our businesses. And we just had this moment where we're like, wouldn't it be cool if we became like the Joanna and Clea of speaking and presentations? And we had our own version of the home edit, and we like beautifully went into people's businesses and their brains and organized all these things in like rainbow color coded like colors and created slide decks that help them perfectly say, this is what I do, this is what I have to offer, and then help them sell their stuff. Like, wouldn't that be cool? And I literally said that out loud over mimosas to Emily, and she looked at me and she's like, yes, yes, let's do that. And quite literally over a napkin, I ideated on this and we thought about like what could be. And we instantly were like, no freaking way. But then we made it happen. We made it happen, quite frankly, actually exactly 108 days later, we launched the company. So it started over mimosas and brunch, just like anything amazing.
It blows my mind that all of this came together in 108 days because I still remember a random afternoon when Emily was working at the clubhouse. It was the idea had just started to take formation and she was telling me about, what you guys were working on and just how quickly it progressed has been incredible to witness. And I have to say that, we wrote that founder's napkin story is such a great, like, if this was a meet cute, you guys would be like the fairy tale rom-com version of it, which I love. So I have to ask, a lot of people listening might think, and this was a question that came to mind for me too, why merge your businesses instead of just, let's say, if you had complementary services and skill sets, why not just subcontract out to each other, be each other's go-to referral partners? Why did it have to be the merger?
Yeah, we actually had been talking around that since we met. So we had been talking about all the different ways that, oh, we could affiliate here, we could refer back here. And the more we talked, the more we realized that our businesses needed each other. You know, our audiences needed both of us at every stage. And it was kind of that was the conversation that we were having a lot of the times, and we couldn't quite figure out the best ways to do it to be really efficient, because we would essentially lose efficiencies by doing it separately, but we're still doing the same things. And I think what it came down to is we had successful businesses. We could do it on our own. We didn't necessarily need to merge anything. We didn't have to do it, but we just clicked, and we are so aligned in our values and our vision, and the way that we communicate is so unique and so special. And so we just were able to kind of move through this process so easily, and it just has felt right at every stage. And so there were a lot of advantages to it for us for both business and personal reasons. But it was kind of a, you know, this would really just answer a lot of our questions about how to collaborate and how to do all of this. And it would allow us to be able to focus in on the zones that we really excel at. You know, Heather is phenomenal at the sales and the marketing and the speaking and all of that, and I really love the operations and the creative direction and the design. And so it allows us to, she doesn't have to worry as much about the operations, I don't have to worry about as much about the front end. And so it allowed us to really kind of go into our zones. I don't know, Heather, do you have other thoughts?
I think like it's just so funny because like the logical thing would be let's do a joint venture. Let's collaborate over a program. But this is going to sound really wild. Okay, so let's use a dating analogy here.
I love myself a good analogy.
Pretend like you're like, yeah, a single woman, you're doing great on your own. I don't need a man. I'm doing awesome. And then like the movie moment happens, your version of a napkin, but like with a dude. And you're like, I didn't really want this in my life. I wasn't looking for it, but like you can't look away. We joke all the time that we kind of fell business in love with each other head over heels pretty quickly, where it was one of those things that's like, we just like the way the other person thinks. And it's so funny because there was nothing wrong with either of the businesses. In fact, they were banging. They were both doing really, really, really well. But all we kept asking was how much better could it be if we joined forces? It wasn't a math equation where it was like combining our two businesses together. It was like a multiplication. I guess that technically is still a math equation, but you follow me. Like what we're saying here is like, how much bigger could it get and how much more impact could we make? And one of the big things for me was, I mean, I have young kids at home. So I'm like, how lazy can I be and work less? Like having a business partner. So somebody else is stressing about things while I go on vacation and vice versa. That sounded really great. So there was just so much more to gain from it that trumped any kind of, giving up something like that. It was so obvious that that's what we needed to do.
It sounds like everything was really in flow, really in lockstep since the beginning, and I love that both of you leaned so intuitively toward that. I'm just curious, what are your official roles on paper, I guess, in the business? Are you co-CEOs, or is one of you, COO, CEO? Like how did you split that responsibility?
We haven't actually written that down as of yet. It's on
An
our
honest
to-do
answer. I appreciate it.
it's on our to-do list. The roles that we've really naturally fallen into, and we actually had this conversation very, very early on when we were trying to figure out what each of us like to do, because we came from being able to make all of the decisions in our businesses independently without having to run it by anybody. And so figuring out how that was going to work going forward was a little bit of a concern for both of us. And once we realized that we both care really deeply about certain pieces, and there are other pieces that we are not as worried about, and those just happen to be very complementary, was also a really cool moment. But we really kind of land in the visionary integrator side of things. So we read, what was that book, Rocket Fuel?
Rocket fuel and traction.
Traction, yeah. So we read that and we're like, okay, yeah, this is us. This helps kind of define it. So we use that, because the fact that, especially through this transitional time, our businesses there's so much happening and there's so many pieces that we really both need to do a lot of things. We wear a lot of hats. Our roles change hour to hour, and going into the future, we've got plans for how that's going to grow as our team expands as well. But we're sort of in that. Heather can kind of take on that visionary role. I can take on that integrator role. And that is sort of what we've been using. But a lot of it is us doing things side by side.
I can totally see those like how you perfectly fit those two pieces of a puzzle together, because I really see that in you, Emily. Like you're very operations, very systems oriented, and Heather, you have so many great ideas and you're so public facing even in your past business. And we should actually take a moment to talk about that just so the listeners have context before we get further into this whole merger. Heather, you were really a public facing business as a speaking coach, right? And you're teaching people how to show up as their best selves on camera, on stages. And then Emily, you loved being in the behind the scenes role of helping people design these gorgeous presentations, these high converting slide decks and everything so that they could have the most success with their presentations. Just give us the quick 30 seconds, the dirty 30 of what your businesses were separately before you guys came together. Emily, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I had grown a presentation design agency. And so we did done for you content and consulting, training. Done for you design is a lot what we did for both corporate and entrepreneurs. So in corporate, it was for stage presentations, for sales pitches, for different things like that. For entrepreneurs, it was for webinars and courses and workshops and all that good stuff. And then I actually built it again. I don't love being out there. It's not my favorite place to be out marketing. So I actually built the company and built a lot of systems in place to leverage referrals and repeat clients. And so like 95% of our clients were referrals or repeat. And so I didn't have to do a lot of marketing, which was phenomenal. And I loved it that way. So that was where I had grown my agency to right before the merger.
Amazing. And Heather, what about you?
Yeah, so I definitely built the personal brand, as you said, online. I was down the lane of doing the more scalable options. So what surprises most people is I'm an introvert, but I'm really, really good with words. I used to be terrified of public speaking, and I worked my ass off to get better at speaking. I got really good on stage. And what I figured out is most people really struggle to get their ideas out of their head. And for me, it didn't just come naturally. I learned how to make my brain to my mouth muscle work really well. And more importantly, I learned how to communicate things in a way that other people understood it. And when I entered the online space, I thought I was just going to teach public speaking to people in corporate. I learned pretty quickly that entrepreneurs had to sell themselves. So I built my entire brand specifically for online businesses, helping them show up on literal stages, but also virtual stages. That was a fun pivot in 2020, but we made that pivot nicely. But what I helped people with was like, how do you not just build a talk for a stage? How do you actually speak magnetically in your business? Whether in a podcast, you're on a live stream, you're on your own show, you're on a stage. Every time you step up to the mic, you're marketing for your business. And I got really good at that. Built a podcast, still rocking it. We still have the podcast today. Built the email list. I had all the front facing stuff done, and I'd had a program that was 90%. I built it up to be 90% of my revenue. And that I was going the scalable route. Like I was full steam ahead on that. I was working with very few clients. I was just working on clients who were working big stages at the time. But yeah, things were going really, really well. Like we were on really great projections for this year. So slight little curveball.
But honestly, the best unexpected turn that it could take. And I mean, there's so many things that I want to ask you guys about your individual expertise. And maybe that's where we can give you a little glimpse of, what Emily and Heather are amazing at in our bonus live after show that we do at the end of each month with our podcast guests. So I know what I want to ask you guys there. Emily specifically about presentations and Heather, of course, about speaking and showing up confidently. But for now, if we get back to the case study real quick, one of the things that you guys mentioned to me in our pre-conversation over Voxer was that you set out in this merger not necessarily to widen your customer base, although I have no doubts that expansion will be a natural part of your company growth, but really to serve the same audience in a much deeper way, which I really, really love that approach. And I think that it's very refreshing in an online space, especially where so many entrepreneurs are obsessed with scale. It's the depth piece of it, I think, is something that is rarely talked about. So I would love to explore that a little bit more with you all. What exactly does that look like in your mind to serve that audience on a deeper level? Can you explain?
I could say what comes to mind immediately, and I'll say this carefully because we never want to be talked about this. We never want our previous clients to feel like they were not getting the best, right? And this is the balance that you have when you have a great company and you built something new. You never want to annihilate the old thing for the new thing. But one of the things that is just a reality that as coaches or as educators, we're all limited by our own coaching and teaching style. And the reality is that people learn in different ways. So while I know I'm damn good at what I do, what I also know is that my style might not resonate with everyone. And I can do everything that I can to have different training modalities and different ways to coach people in the program. But one of the things that I noticed is even though my program was working great, I saw that, I'm an out loud external thinker, which I'm sure Emily's going to have a lot to say on that because we are different communicators. But I noticed that while people were finding great success in my program, I saw a real opportunity that, not everybody thinks the way I do. Not everyone practices or preps for a speaking gig. So I had to adjust how I taught. But I think about this now, like how much more powerful it is that we can show people how to learn in different ways, not just by saying, look at Heather, she's great on a stage, but now they can say, like, look at Emily, she's a model. I'm more like her. I'm more of the internal person. I'm more the person who doesn't really want to be on stage, but I'm going to do it because I know my business needs it. Like being able to have two different role models and two different examples of what's possible, both mean successful, that's really powerful for a client base. So that mindset wise, I think that is something that's really, really powerful. And not a lot of businesses are offering that. But in addition to that, I think like where I was at, I'm not at a point in my business where I want to work with people one on one, but I know that clients need it, especially when you get to a point in your business where you're like, I just want to hire it out. I want somebody to build something. And so I know looking at my old base, that was something that I was unwilling to offer. It was just a hard boundary for me. So that was the first initial attraction when I came across Emily. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do it, but you love doing it. Like that's my people need you. So logically speaking, just having a done for you option was a very smart move on my end because I knew I had clients that wanted to pay for it.
And I had the inverse. I was working with people one on one. That's where I prefer. That's where I love to be. That's what my clients were needing. That's where I had attracted audiences and gotten referrals into people that wanted that. But I didn't have an option that was more scalable for me or more accessible for them. And so it was, or a little bit more, self paced. And so that was it had been on my radar of something to do eventually when I had time. But that was one of the things that was really attractive as well, is not only the different style, because Heather and I do have very different communication styles, both on stage and off. And we figured out how to balance that as business partners. And we figured out how to leverage that in the services that we're bringing into our clients through the Speaker Co. But also that depth of an offer suite. And so we're able to really stack essentially what we were doing into a stronger offer suite to be able to serve clients at a bigger range of stages of growth and of growing their own businesses than we would have been able to do alone. And this was one of the things that really kind of cinched some things early on for us. Was we actually have how when you are building a business, you kind of like sketch things out and you're like, all right, this is my drawing, right? Well, I had been drawing the same thing over and over and over again of the things that I was going to grow, the way that the company was going to end up. And what we realized is that Heather had the same type of drawing, and our drawings, you could almost lay them on top of each other. We had been dreaming of building the same type of company. We just started in different places. I started with done for you design and consulting, and Heather had started on the education and the coaching. And so what we could do was we could bring that together and we could get to that vision faster together in a stronger place than we would have.
Wow, that's such a beautiful imagery. I see what you mean. Like you started at different points, but ultimately you were going to land in the middle, but you're getting to meet in the middle faster through your complementary strengths. And I definitely do want to circle back to your different communication styles because I think that's really fascinating, how two people who are very different in their approaches can work so well together. But before we do that, because this case study is really focused on how you were able to merge two completely separate businesses in such a short time window, 108 days, I do want to start building out that timeline a little bit for our listeners. So you met for that magical brunch April 2022. And then after you for sure decided, okay, we're doing this thing. At what point in that timeline did you start actually telling your existing clients and customers a change is coming?
Well, it took us a hot minute to actually say we're doing it. So I think honoring that piece, well, I'm going to weave in a piece about the communication style, and then we can come back to that in detail in a moment. But Emily and I, so we met a couple times after that, and we kept going like, no way, this is not going to work. I think it probably took us, like 3 weeks to finally come up, maybe even 4.
It was almost a full month. We was very, the show Love is Blind on Netflix, how they're like, we're in these pods. We have to know everything about your entire life and all of your everything in this short amount of time because we have to make a choice. That's a little bit how it felt. Like it was like, okay, cards on the table. I need to know everything about everything right now because if we're going to do this, we have to be very well informed. And so there's a lot of conversation, a lot of very, very honest conversation, a lot of figuring out how to have conversation very early on. And it took us probably a month before we were like, okay, yeah, yep, let's do this. And I think the first time that I actually said it out loud to anybody else other than, like my husband or a couple of friends, was Ellen at the clubhouse at that day when I shared it. I think it was book club. And that was the first time that I had like, that was when it came out loud. And so it was, actually no, that might have been earlier on. I think that was when we were in our conversation stages, but it was a good probably month.
So thinking about that, just going that 108-day timeline is literally from the napkin mimosa idea, not to the decision. So it's really closer to like 70 something days when we talk about like the moment where we decide it. We didn't even name the company probably until June. I mean, this was in April, so probably June. We went really back and forth on that. But like, this is a very, very like pressed timeline. And I'll also add in that timeline, we initially were like, this is cuckoo. Like, we should just partner on a program first. So first we had decided, why don't we launch a program together and see how it goes? And as long as we don't kill each other and everything looks good, then we'll launch the company. And I think that's the conversation that you had at the clubhouse, was telling people about that. And then, so we were going off on that for weeks. And then we were like, this is crazy. I don't know. Like, I don't know if you're feeling it, but I'm feeling like this just feels like if we're going to do it, we're going to go for it all the way. And like, we just went all in. And so, out loud speaking, we were pretty hush hush. But I remember we started telling people that were not our like immediate, very, very close friends and family, probably at the ConvertKit conference, which was in late June, into June 24th ish. We went there together, and we were still in our independent businesses. We were not out of the business building closet yet. Like, nobody knew what the Speaker Co. was, but we did. We had been working on it for weeks, and we started floating our messaging out. We started telling people what we did. We had to fumble through it a little bit because we realized we were kind of confusing people, and they were way more fascinated by the partnership and why we're ditching our businesses and not by like the what we were doing. So that was fun. But definitely June. And then we didn't start telling clients probably right before we officially launched in August. So it was mid to late July when we started telling our people.
Wow. And how did you approach that conversation? Because I imagine, I mean, it's a lot of excitement, right? And it's a lot of, hey, here's a way that we can serve you even better. But at the same time, there is still, for a lot of people, hesitation whenever there's change. So how are you able to bring that excitement and help them see the possibility while also managing expectations, fears, whatever it may be?
Yeah. So on the agency side of it, I really position it all as an expansion because nothing changed in terms of what we're offering. What I was offering before is what we're offering in the Speaker Co. And so it was a nice way to just say, hey, this is coming. And it was, I believe I sent something out the end of July. I waited for a while because we really needed to have a solid transition plan in place. And there was very much okay, if you have projects going now that are ending in the next however many days, this is what you can expect. If you have something going on through the end of the year, this is what you can expect. If it's something longer, we'll do this. So there was a lot of, we've got a plan. We will have conversations with people individually as needed. But people were really, really excited for us. People are like, I trust it. You're good. Sounds like you have it under control. So excited for you and Heather. So it was a really, really nice reception, which I wasn't expecting anything different. We have amazing clients, but it was being able to wait until we had everything mapped out in terms of what that transition was going to look like to communicate was really key, I think, in the success of the messaging.
That's such a great sign and so encouraging. Just to make sure I understood correctly, that first touch point then when you revealed the transition plan was via email, correct? To the whole group, and then you made the offer that you could have individual conversations, or was it individually to each person?
So we've got a fair amount of active clients, or I had at the time, projects wrapped up. But and so I sent something via email to active clients first. And most of them if I had a call with them or a touch point with them in the like 2 weeks prior. But again, this was, mid July. We were 3 weeks out from saying things out loud. And so it happened so fast. So it was a really, really compressed timeline that way. I would give them a heads up just to give them a little bit of context. So most of them knew, especially ones that we had really big projects going where their timeline wouldn't necessarily be affected, but they would be seeing things more than for instance, somebody whose project was wrapping up in August where they weren't going to be as impacted by any shifts. But it was, yeah, it was via email, I guess.
That's awesome. And Heather, did you take a similar approach, or how did you tell your initial clients or students rather?
Yeah, so it was a little different on my side. So I have a large audience because of growing, like, the brand online, the podcast. So I mean, I show up every week. I'm going live, I'm doing the podcast, I'm emailing the list, and I had an active membership. So I think this is something that I had an active membership base, people who had like paid in advance for a full year that isn't expiring for a while. So there are some complexities there. So the one thing I want to address when you're talking about like change is scary, as entrepreneurs, when we're thinking about how we talk about things, where we focus is what our audience is going to hear. So initially, when we were talking about this, Emily and I were very adamant of going, we don't ever want to send the message to people that like we needed a partnership, that like we were desperate, or signaling the message that like, oh, the business is failing. I don't know, like a lot of people have been talking in the online space. There's been a lot of conversations around people going back and getting jobs, people deciding to leave. Like there are you can choose to look at that as like, oh my gosh, there's uncertainty, people are not making it. And that's never the narrative that I ever want to give, because I believe that becoming an entrepreneur, there's like so much power in that. And you can create so much flexibility and choice in your life. And so one of the things that I really grappled with was a lot of the people that were in my programs and a lot of the people listening to the podcast are earlier entrepreneurs, and they're still trying to figure out how to make their voice in the world. And the last thing that I wanted to do was send them the message that like, well, shoot, if I can't do it on my own, there's no freaking hope for you. And that quite generally was one of the things in my mind, because so I'm a manifester. Emily introduced me to human design, and I learned about that. And I evidently very deeply care what other people think about me, even though I'm going to do what I want anyway. There's like this grappling piece, and I think we all struggle to a degree with that. But I really struggled with, what are they going to think? And it wasn't, what are they going to think about me? I didn't care about that. I was worried about the message that I would signal to them of what would they think of themselves and their goals and what was possible for them. And that was the thing that really, really said, okay, I have to be very cautious and very intentional with how I message this. Because as it's well and exciting, as this is an expansion, it potentially could send the wrong message. So I first communicated the message to my program members. We did that in June as we kind of piggyback that on. I was traveling with Emily for that event. So I told them live on one of our calls, and I floated it past a couple members before just to get some feedback around what their questions would be. And it was met with nothing but enthusiasm. We were very smart. We're very strategic thinkers, and we don't do anything kind of haphazardly. I had Emily come present as a guest speaker inside my program 2 months prior. So I had already introduced them to Emily. I'd already had her in the community. I'd already positioned it as a bonus that Emily was going to stick around and do some bonus trainings. She was already in, so we'd already warmed that up. I had already had Emily on my podcast back last fall. We also had her come in June before it was public. So we started dripping things in, because as a business owner, you create the narrative for your audience. So we were very intentional, even though we were flying very fast. We were very strategic in how we laid it out. So it started live. I shared a podcast episode on that. I spent a lot of time sending the announcement email, which went to our full audience. And then Emily sent a version to her audience. But we very much were specific with the messaging as that value add. And we do what we do best, which is we told the story about it. We talked about the story of the mimosas and the napkin, and that really has become a fun part. So what's cool is, in my long-winded rant here about all of my thoughts, this is the like very much a relationship. We brought people on the journey with us. We've been telling them that this is not done. We're building the plane as we fly. We're like winging it in a lot of ways, but not in the way of like what we're building. And people have really been excited about the journey. People like you are reaching out and saying, how can we support you? How can we promote you? How can we be part of this? How can we interview you? And I think that's been a really big part of it, that our people have felt like they've come on the ride with us.
We're back for lightning round. This is the first time we've ever done lightning round with two people. So I'm kind of curious how this will go. I will ask that each of you answer the question, but
I
let's
feel like I
try
need
to
a buzzer. Do I have a
Yeah,
buzzer?
I was gonna say.
let's try to limit the answers to 30 seconds each. Are we
All right,
ready
I know
for
you're
this?
talking to me on that one. All right, all right.
Okay, first question, and I'll switch off who goes first. So I'm just gonna let you know, Emily, I'm gonna have you go first on this one. It's an easy one. So first question, how many alarms do you set in the morning? And are you a snoozer or are you someone that like first alarm hits, you're up and going?
Heather's laughing so much right now. I set between 3 and 5 alarms,
Same, same.
all 2 to 3 minutes apart. I have to annoy myself into waking up, and I will 100% snooze them for like an hour.
We are so alike in that way. Heather, what about you?
I don't use an alarm. I wear hearing aids, so I would never be able to hear an alarm because I can't hear. So how I wake up is my husband has an alarm and he pushes me. like like taps or pushes. There has to be like a physical that could go a really different direction. Anyways, my husband wakes me up in the morning.
You know what's funny? I can't remember what it must have been some TV show, but there was like a joke invention of like someone's like a hand slapping you in the face to like waking you up. So that's
Yeah, I
literally
need
what I
that. I
pictured.
need that.
That's amazing. By the way, this is something we didn't talk about in our interview, but I'm just going to plug this real quick as a fun fact because I think it's really cool. Emily is actually partially colorblind, and Heather is partially deaf. And yet they have taken these things that you might initially perceive as weaknesses and leveraged it into strengths in a speaking business and a presentation design business. So I just have to say, I hope that's encouragement to all of you. Whatever you think is your weakness, you can turn it into a strength. Okay, I digress. Second question. How early do you get to the airport before a trip? Heather, you go.
I have been flying for a very long time, and I am the bougie person who has all the airline miles, and I fly first class and get upgrades, and I am like unapologetic for that. So I have TSA pre, I fly first class, so I do not spend a lot of time in the airport. And if I do, it's to have champagne at the bar before I get on the flight. So I am a roll right in before, but I am a very good planner. So I know and I check road times to make sure I'm good to go.
I love that. I love how unapologetic you are about owning this is the vision for my life and I'm going to live it. We should all live that way.
I put in the road miles to earn that right, so I have no problem saying it.
And what about you?
I have had a couple of close calls getting stuck in long security lines because I have not put in as many. I've traveled a lot, but like I don't know. I haven't done all the paperwork to get all the things. So I show up about 2 hours before, and I actually plan. I actually enjoy my airport quiet time. Like that's. It feels like this weird protected time where nobody can get to me, and I'm
Mm.
very, very okay with building that into my travel day.
I love that. You know, I am with you. I actually love spending time in the airport. We have our business credit card gives us this like lounge access. So I love just getting there early and people watching and spending time in the airport. But I hate the time on the plane. Like I hate flying. So not because I'm scared, it's just so boring to me. So I get you
That's
there.
the part I like. That's for
Really?
me. I take out my hearing aids and I don't have to talk to people and I will drink my champagne and it's like, oh, the quote unquote, the internet's not working, so nobody can reach me. It is working. I just tell people it's not working so that I don't have to send emails. So
But
I love the flight time.
but that probably also has a little to do with sitting in first class. I
Probably.
would say the experience is probably a little
All
bit
right.
different
These
in
are bougie
economy.
problems that I'm not even aware of my own problems. All right. I hear you. Checkmate.
Okay, this final question, this is probably the hardest one, so I will preface this. So whoever wants to jump in first, go for it. What would be the title of your memoir? You guys are words people, so I felt like this would be an interesting question to ask.
I'll go.
Yeah?
My memoir would be Go Full Ass. That is my life mantra of if anything I do, of anything, if that was my message to share with the world, it would be go full ass.
We are aligned in that regard, Heather. I definitely feel like we're soul sisters on like we're either all in or we're all out, but there's not very much in between there. So, yes, love it. Emily, what about you?
I've literally never thought of this in my entire life. Um,
I gave you space for your internal thinking. You should be ready by now.
no, I need my processing time. Heather, you didn't talk as much as I thought you were going to.
She told me lightning round. I'm sweating. I'm like, I have to go faster.
Goes against your instincts. I would say the title of mine would be "There's No Time Like Crunch Time." I am a very deadline-driven human. I do things at the 11th hour. I'm very, very comfortable doing this. But I think that would make for just an interesting tee up of the memoir of my life.
As a lifetime procrastinator, I appreciate that, and I would read that book. I would read both of your books. That's so impressive. The intentionality is what's so impressive to me because it takes a lot to live in that duality of I'm willing to take big risks, I'm willing to move fast and as you said build the plane as we fly it, but also not leave the people who make it possible, your audience, your customers behind as we're, going 10,000 feet in the air. And so that's such an impressive approach. And I think a lot of people can take value points from both of your approaches, no matter where they are in their business, or even if they're not necessarily planning any time in the future to partner with someone or to merge businesses. Just the idea of how can you be really intentional about bringing your audience on the journey and also making sure that you have a very clearly defined transition plan for any changes that you choose to implement in your business, as Emily said. So thank you, ladies, for sharing that so transparently. So, from my understanding, then, we're now sitting at around the 60 to 90-day mark in the timeline, if you will, from that April moment. We've now told your audiences. Now let's fast forward to what happened in those final, I guess, 20 to 30 days, because you have now since launched the Speaker Co. In fact, I believe you launched a big thing this week. What did that launch plan then look like?
Well, not a lot of sleep.
No, no, a lot of very late nights, very early mornings, very long weekend work days. It's been a lot of work because we've had to really ramp up as we still had momentum from our other businesses. And so it's been a lot. It's been good. It's been great. In terms of how the long
Did you notice your voice when she repeated that excessively? Like,
I literally, the Ross, in Friends, he's like, "It's fine, I'm fine, I'm fine." Like, that just flashed in my head.
it's been so it's you talk about that duality. It's been so interesting because it's been in some ways like one of the most exhausting phases of business I think either of us have probably ever had. But in other ways, it's been the most positive, the most exciting, the most just full of potential. And it's a lot, but it's great. Heather, do you want to talk about the launch process a little bit? You're a little more dialed into that timeline.
yeah, so we had lots of things happening. We had the website we had to launch, and we both, what's so funny, Emily had just done a big fancy redesign of her website with branding and all of that. I had done that a year prior. Like it was like, oh, so it was the public facing stuff we had to do, right? So we had to launch the website, we had to write the copy, we had to figure out photos of the two of us together, which thanks to Clubhouse, we were at the Clubhouse one day and we brought our iPhones and just styled our own photo shoot. We had to do that. We had to get copy out for promotions. We had to figure out what are we going to do with the podcast? Are we going to keep the name? Are we going to change the name? We had to figure out our offers, right? We had the agency, what we're going to call it. So there's all these public facing things. But then we also had, you're going to giggle on this one, all these internal things that we never even thought about, like, are we going to start a new Canva account or are we going to like use one of our existing ones or like Dropbox or, oh my gosh, do you remember how annoying it was to set up your G Suite and your DNS codes for a website? I'm like, it's like, I don't know, for those listening who have babies, it's like when you deliver a baby, you black out of just how crazy the experience is so that you go on and have other kids. That's what it was like with the business. We forgot about all these little details. We had to do all of those things. And granted, I mean, thankfully we have team members who've helped with those things, but all of it, like we went full out on this, the website, the design, the branding, things that I would never have recommended for a new business owner to tackle. But while it was a new business, we were not new to business. So we were going to do this in a way that was the type of brand and the position on the brand that we wanted. But yeah, there were a lot of pieces. So we were flying the plane as we were building the plane. We're still building the plane, but the website, we launched it on, officially the brand launch was August 8th. And that weekend prior, poor Emily tried to take a vacation with her husband, and she was driving down a mountain to find an internet cafe to fix the buttons on Show It, because I don't know how to use the Show It website. And I'm writing copy at 11 p.m. Like, we did it, right? And I want to say this, like, the website we launched on the 8th, it was scrappy and there were typos and there were buttons that didn't work, but it was out. And we've slowly been fixing it as we go. But that's the journey of an entrepreneur, is that you don't just like wait for it to be perfect. We made the commitment that we were going to show up and we were going to keep swinging. And that's what we've been doing. And it's working.
That is so inspiring, and I think it's so true. I think the sooner people can really embrace iteration, like, iteration is your life as an entrepreneur. If you can embrace iteration over perfection, you're going to go so much farther. So, I love that, and not only, by the way, I just wanna add in, not only did you guys do all of these things, both forward-facing and behind the scenes, but you also, in the midst of all of this, somehow planned a business retreat out of state, might I add. So we just have to mention this, okay? By the time you're listening to this podcast, you actually will still have a little bit of time before this retreat. I mean, it'll be just a few weeks out, but October 21st and 22nd in Phoenix, Arizona, these two ladies are hosting the Speaker Co's Bougie Biz Retreat, which I'm so honored to be a speaker at. So we just got to give this retreat a little plug because holy heck, how did you even plan this event while all of this was going on?
That's actually the thing that we were like least stressed about. So both Heather and I come from event backgrounds, and so putting together an event, even an out of state event, is 1,000% in our wheelhouses. And so it was actually really refreshing for us to have somebody else with, equal experience that has the same expectations for what an event should be, to be able to tag team it. So that, I think, was actually the least over. It was like, no, we got event, no problem, no problem. But like the tech, we need to figure that out.
So I have to ask then why have an event at this moment in time? Was it part of the whole launch plan or was it just an add-on or why the timing of this event, I
Oh,
guess, is my
oh,
question.
that's cute. That's cute. Okay, I'm gonna give you the real answer, not like the sugary PR the part of things. Okay. Emily and I both have always had in our strategies, we want to host live events. And I mean, hello, the world has not really been receptive to that over the last few years. But that was both in when she talked about that little map of the businesses that we laid over, having a done for you agency, having online education, and having live events. Those were the three parts of the business. So this is the real talk thing. I was an affiliate for a program in June. And that was right at the time where Emily and I were coming together. And I just like put my arm around her. I'm like, perfect. You're joining me with this whole affiliate thing. I'm like bundling you in. It's a 2-for-1 special. And so I just started pulling her in. And that affiliate launch that I did, I mean, I have no idea where it came from, but freaking slayed it. Like that launch was killer. We were at number 4 on the affiliate ranking board, which I wasn't even on the map when it came to leads for that launch. For anyone who doesn't know about that, like it's you bring traffic into someone else's business for a launch and just freaking slayed it. And I had wanted to do that launch full out. And so I had the idea, I'm like, why don't I do a retreat as a bonus for this? And I was thinking like baby nuggets. A couple people would come. We can host it locally in Portland. It was for James Wedmore's program. And so here I am ranking up on the leaderboard. And so I texted James. He had given his number and he was like, if you need questions or have questions, he was on the podcast. And I'm like, hey, if I were to host a retreat as my bonus, would you come? And I mean, I don't know many people who have the balls to ask James Wedmore that, but I do. So I asked him and he said yes. So I'm like, all right, well, now I'm committed. So I went full out in that launch. And we had, like I said, we ranked number 4, but we were committed to the retreat. And I think that's the lesson to take away here is when you have a big goal and you want to do something, if you do not put yourself in a position where you're committed to do it, you will find a way to make an excuse and kick the bucket, which I think is what we all do in business. So that launch forced our hand. And I think in the best way, where when we were in the thick of it, planning the website and planning our Speaker Society launch, which is the one from this week, we're like, we already committed. We already have 30 something people who are getting tickets. We may as well go ahead and like go all out with it. And that's been our mantra for everything. If we're going to do it, we're going to commit fully. So there was no other choice. And as Emily said, we can plan an event in our sleep. Like we got this.
I wish I had that gift set. I do not. Planning an event to me is like such a Herculean task. Very, very rewarding, I will say. I mean, there's nothing quite like in-person connection, which is why I'm so excited to be at your retreat. But wow, that I think that's such a great piece of advice of just how can you really up your own buy-in to any goal that you're, putting out there so that it really kind of forces you to show up and be accountable in some way, right? And getting someone else, making a big ask of someone else who's like, okay, yeah, I'll show up for you. Now you're like, okay, well, I guess I have to show up too if I ask you to show up for me. So I really like that strategy, just to make sure at when this episode releases, which will be this Monday, can people still apply for this retreat? Are there any tickets left?
Yes, we have a handful of spots left. This is a very small retreat. I mentioned like the 30 number earlier. Not all those people are coming. This is going to be a curated event. It's like 24 people, and you get to hang out with Ellen and James Wedmore and our other lineup of speakers. So just because it's your audience, Ellen, and because you're a speaker at it, if anybody's interested, yes, they can actually just bypass the application process. Like they can be in Cubicle to CEO. We love y'all. We would love to have you there. If they're your audience, they're a really great fit. So just reach out to us. They can just send us a direct message on Instagram over on at the Speaker Co. and just voice message us, and we will get you all hooked up for that event.
Oh, wow. You're amazing. Thank you. Thank you to both of you for extending that invitation. You heard it here. Make sure if you're craving that high speaker to attendance ratio and you really want intimate hands-on feedback on your business, not just you sitting, in an auditorium looking at a speaker on stage. This is totally a different experience. So if you want to be part of that and hang out with us in person for a couple days in Arizona, and I know us Pacific Northwest girls could use some sunshine any time of year. So if you want to be there, make sure you Instagram DM at the Speaker Co. Right, and let them know that you're from Cubicle to CEO, so you can just straight on bypass the application. Okay, we've talked about a lot. This timeline is immensely helpful. I did want to circle back to that point that I mentioned earlier about communication styles. You mentioned that you had some hard conversations during this process. And not only that, you have very distinct communication styles. So I'd love to know well, first off, like what are your distinct conversation or communication styles? And two, what were some of those hard questions that you had to ask each other? Because I think that might be helpful for anybody listening who may be entering into a partnership of any sort and thinking about what kinds of questions should I be asking my potential business partner.
Yeah. So I'll answer the first part, Heather, if you want to take the second. So our communication styles are like they're very different. They're very different both in how we process things, like how we process information is very different, and how we communicate our thoughts is very different. So Heather is an external processor. She says the words as the thoughts happen. I am an internal processor. So I think all of my thoughts, and then when the words come out, it is baked. It is ready. And it took us a minute to understand that. So when I talked, she thought that I was, just like it was a partial thought. And when she talked, I thought that she was like done. I was like, wait, but I have questions. And so when we first had our first couple of meetings after the brunch, we were actually in person and we had a hard time, and we both kind of went back and we're like, I don't know if this is going to work. Like Heather didn't really feel, neither of us really were feeling like hurt, or like we're like something's off, something's not really fitting right, even though we're clicking in so many ways. And so we kind of had to have this like, okay, like cards on the table, that didn't work for me. What we need to figure out how to do this differently. And so it was actually looking at I think that was when we kind of brought in like human design, because I'm a projector. And so we just approach things very differently. And so it just gave us any sort of framework to kind of start from, to start to understand our differences. But we've actually figured out, and we use Voxer all the time. So we voice message because it allows Heather to ramble out all the words, all the thoughts, all the whatever. And it gives me space. It gives us both space to say as much as we want, process as much as we want. We can come back as quickly or, as not quickly as we need. And that was when things kind of unlocked. We were able to work through that. But we have had a lot of conversations. We actually have I don't have it here. It's at my house. Heather has hers.
I have mine, but it's broken because my kids broke it. This is a little tiny cactus. There's a topper for it right there.
So we have what we call cactus conversations. So they are the prickly conversations that are not fun, but they are necessary. And we named those pretty early on because we needed some sort of intro to, hey, okay, this is a little cactus convo moment here. And then whatever the thought was, whatever the thing is. And we really had to kind of figure that out. And it took the pressure off of it, kind of the sting out of it. It's not a personal thing. It's that we just have to have this conversation. And I think it came down to the fact that we both came in with successful businesses, and if we were going to blow them up and start something new or build them into something new together, that was putting a lot on the line for both of us, and we weren't willing to risk it for something that wasn't we didn't feel 150% about. So it took a lot of very, very honest conversations about pretty much everything.
That's so brilliant. I'm totally going to steal that cactus conversation. I mean, that's so brilliant because it puts someone in the right frame of mind, I think, to receive something that may not, like you said, be very comfortable or very uh, not like not positive, but just not maybe what they wanted to hear in that moment, but it's honest. And like you said, if you're not willing to have those hard, honest conversations, you probably should not be entering into a partnership because you have to feel 100% trust and confidence in the other person. So, love that. Definitely stealing that for my team. Heather, the second part of the question, what were some of those hard questions or hard conversations that you had to ask each other?
Oh, we have so many of them. I'll give you some examples here. But one funny thing, Emily and I were talking about this yesterday. We were talking about how healthy our conversation, like our communication skills are. And we were joking. I'm like, I think I have a healthier communication style with you than I do my husband. And she's like, same girl, same. Like, so you know how normally when something bothers you, we do what we normally do, which is we just like let it go, right? Or we become passive aggressive and let things go. What we've done really well is like call out of like, I'm feeling something. And we use all the communication techniques that Brene Brown and whoever else has taught us around like the story I'm telling myself is. But I'll give you an example of a really early one. So in earlier in our conversations, we were both trying to figure out, we're both confident that we can build our own businesses, but let's be honest, I'm an external processor, I'm a manifester. I kind of do what I want. Like that's my personality is like, I have an idea. I don't check with anyone. I go do it. And I've never had to do that. And I remember when we switched our conversations to Voxer, one of the things we had to talk about was like, look, I'm a bossy person. Like I didn't want to sound like egotistical, but I'm like, I am the front person. I have the ideas. I say out loud. And quite frankly, I'm really good at those things. And I don't know if I want a business partner or if I just need an employee. And we talked like that was one of the conversations we had out loud, and we had to talk through that. And I think one of the things that we do both really well that steal this page off of our playbook, you have to understand what your own baggage is for prior business communication and communication in general. And you also have to be aware of how you come across. So, for example, like for me, when I'm in brainstorm mode or if I'm in business mode, I don't have my podcaster voice on. That's like nice and pleasant and like sweet. When I'm talking, my voice, my facial structure, I have a very narrow mouth and I have a low voice, so it can sound kind of snarky. And so I have to be aware that when I'm talking an idea or if I'm giving feedback, if I have kind of my non-warm voice on, that's not going to come across very well. So, but I have to have that awareness or Emily to go like, hey, you're kind of in like do mode today. And I actually need a little different side of you. And like that kind of thing is you have to be able to have the awareness that you do communicate in different ways and that it's your responsibility to adapt it. But on the other side, it's your responsibility to tell the other person what you need. So I think those are the things that were really helpful. We also had to have really uncomfortable conversations around like what's the partnership split? How are we going to pay each other? Like are we going to go equal? How are we going to handle our proprietary information coming in? Like those conversations, as awkward as they are, you have to have them. So while we were joking earlier that like the title thing, sure, like we have that, but like the actual those things, we wanted to go those things like fundamentally all cards on the table to talk about. Like, well, what do you think about this percentage split? And then give us space to think about it. Well, what really do we think about it? And one of the things that I admire and respect the most about Emily, and this was, I had to deal with my own baggage come to the table. Emily is like the most practical thinker on the planet. And she goes like, what's going to be the best decision for the business? Like, I don't, with my opinion, your opinion doesn't really matter. What's the best decision for the business? And that has been really refreshing for me because what I realized my baggage was I had been in these environments where people were posturing for position and like people were literally out for my job. And there were like some weird dynamics. And to have a conversation with someone who's like, no, like I trust you. You got your lane. Like you're great at that. Let me go do my thing. And then be like, but what's best for the business? That's really, really good. And I think, especially when it comes to partnerships, you have to really respect and believe in the other person and like let them do their thing. Otherwise, that passive aggressive thing is just going to take over.
Oh man, there's so many good takeaways in here. This is probably one of my favorite case studies, I'll be honest, on the podcast, and it really has nothing to do with revenue, which I love even more because it's I mean, our whole show premise is that we want to ask entrepreneurs the business questions that you can't Google. And there's not a lot of resources, quite frankly, out there that really peel back like, what is it really like to merge two businesses together? What does that timeline look like? What does that communication look like? What are those challenges and obstacles and all these things? And so this has been just so wonderful. And one of the hallmarks of our show is that we are very financially transparent, both myself with my income reports, but also our guests have been just incredible in coming to the table and being willing to share some of those numbers or data pieces that can feel a little bit uncomfortable and may not necessarily be the norm to ask on a show like this. So I'm gonna shoot my shot and I'm gonna ask something that you can decline if you don't want to, you know, answer this publicly. But I just want to know, did either of you invest any funds? So outside of, your proprietary information, your IP, your intellectual property, and, your sweat equity, did you actually invest any funds to get this new business off the ground? And what is the partnership split that you decided on in terms of ownership in the business? So you can answer both questions, or maybe you can answer one or neither, but I figured I would put it out there.
So this is you're just going for the jugular on this one. All right, so we definitely put money into the business. So the cool part about it is we both had the existing businesses and we both had marketing expenses and operation expenses already projected. So we were able just to reroute those. So for example, I had already planned on hiring a copywriter for an upcoming launch. We just pivoted what she was working on. So in terms of investment, we have invested tens of thousands of dollars, not like a crap ton, but we put a pretty penny into this, which is not something that we would normally recommend to our clients. Like, you shouldn't go out and buy a new website and hire a designer and have somebody else write your message, and you got to figure that out on your own. But we're not new, like, so we wanted to do this in a little bit of a different way. So yeah, we've sunk some money into it. In terms of the partnership thing, I think out of respect for our partnership, we will politely decline the full transparency on that one, but we are building it. We are definitely both equity stakeholders in the company. I think the most important thing that we have to keep in mind is that partnerships, right? You have to determine how you're going to make decisions. You have to make sure that you have the conversation of who's going to trump when on which elements of the business. So, for example, if we don't get along around how we're going to price something, who's going to make that decision? If we don't have the same vision around how to run an event, or there's different lanes that we had to decide who is the majority owner of that area and how are they going to make those decisions. But I think at the end of the day, you have to make sure that you're working with a partnership attorney or just some kind of attorney who specializes in your thing. We specifically are working with a partnership attorney on this, and make sure you have your CPA involved, because there's all sorts of legalities around LLCs and partnerships and whether or not it's going to be an S corp and all of those things. So we do have that in place. But I'm very excited and proud to be a partner with Emily.
That's really smart, I think, to decide ahead of time when difficult decisions have to be made, who is going to have the final say on which things. And I love that in your partnership, you split it up so that it's not like, oh, it's always my way or the highway, but it's like on certain things, I'm going to default to your final say if we can't come to an agreement. That just one piece of information, I think, will have more impact on women, especially who tend to have less frank conversations about money with their girlfriends, right? Like, historically speaking, I think just that one piece of information can be so helpful to someone listening today who may be going into a joint venture or a partnership or a merger or an acquisition, whatever it may be, and understanding, oh, okay, this is one form of how someone approached this conversation or approach this equity split. And like you two mentioned, it's very hard to find information about this on Google because people keep their lips sealed so much and guarded around this. And so your ability and your willingness to be transparent, I think, is just such a huge value add and such a give back to our community. So I just want to say thank you, like truly thank you for being willing to share that information. My final question for you two, usually my final question is, what does being a CEO mean to you? I realize that in a partnership, it's not exactly the traditional, like, I'm the CEO, I make all the decisions. So, however you want to answer that, whether it's what does leadership mean to you, what does partnership mean to you, what is that term in general, I guess, mean to you in your business going forward?
Yeah, it's really cool because I never envisioned that it would evolve this way. This wasn't my plan when I put together my 2022, year at a glance forecast on my projections. But I'm so glad that it's here. So I would say, what does I don't know, kind of this, it's almost like co-leadership. We're building this thing together, and it's really about being able to drive something forward with somebody, which is new, and it's a learning experience, and it's so much fun. It's, you don't realize how lonely entrepreneurship can get, until you have somebody right next to you who is just as passionate about what you're doing as you are, and being able to kind of lead the businesses that we've built into this transition and into this next chapter of the Speaker Co. is has been incredible, and I'm really really excited for what we've got. Lots of plans. We are not short on plans or ideas, so I'm excited to see where we go and how quickly we can get to kind of these next benchmarks that we've got for ourselves.
I'm so excited for your future as well. And Heather, what about you?
Yeah, I love it. Ditto what Emily said. It's good. I think for me, when I think of CEO and just that role of a CEO, when we think about that as a traditional business owner, I think the biggest role of a CEO is to hold space for vision and to be the one who sees something that other people do not. It's the only reason why businesses exist. And I think what we have to focus on, both in our company, but for any CEO, is how do you continue to hold that vision even when things don't look great or things change or whatever other negative things come or plans change or you start a new business. Like, the role of a CEO is to continue to see the vision and to see the path there. And I think that's the most important thing. And then, I mean, second to that is bringing your people along for the journey. So becoming a leader, both to your audiences, but also your team members. That's the job. All the technical stuff, all the other pieces, those are going to change over time. But having the vision and bringing your people along with it, that's the job.
Well, I can see why you two are wordsmiths, messaging experts, storytelling geniuses. That's such a great way to end this conversation. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Emily, for coming on the show today. If you want to connect with Heather and Emily separately and together, we will post all of their Instagram links below. We'll also post the Speaker Co website below. Make sure you check out their services. I mean, they are really doing something unique in this industry that I have not seen offered at this full level of service. So if you have any sort of presentation in your near future that you would like some assistance and guidance in, I think they're your go-to gals. So thank you so much, guys.